One of the things that happens with depression is our perspective, our view really narrows. All we see is what's negative. All we see is a tiny fraction of our life, of the world, of reality. And so we need tools, we need people to help us go, okay, this is not all there is. It's not hopeless. You're not a failure. Your life isn't over.
Welcome to our episode of Threads of Enlightenment. And thank you so much for coming, guys. As you know, my custom is to welcome our guests because I know that they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive, their time. 24 hours has been offered to each and every one of us here on this planet. And we have Doc coming to share some of her 24 hours with us, and I am honored. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It has created her and it has deposited some information in her, and we want access to those wisdom, knowledge, insight, and so forth. Why? So that you and I can become better human spirits while we're here on this planet. Doc, thank you so much for coming to
Thank you.
Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Introduce yourself to the folks, and then we'll move on to our question that I told you I'm going to toss your way.
Oh, can't wait. So my background is in clinical psychology. I was a garden variety psychotherapist. Actually did my internship in an inpatient state psychiatric hospital, which those don't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
And then got into research, worked a lot in dementia, chronic diseases, et cetera, and now I'm a coach, emotional mastery coach, life coach, transformational coach. We all go success coach, results coach, whatever you want to call it. And a little background, I live with my husband and 2 dogs on an abandoned 117-acre farm in West Virginia.
That is awesome. And welcome. And this question that I tossed, and I know you put out the titles out there as to your profession or the professional part of you. But the question is this, based on the fact that I mentioned that we have the 2 journeys, the independent aspect and the interdependent aspect, if you will. How do you serve mankind?
I would hope that I serve by bringing a really positive energy to my relationships, caring, empathy, lifting people up, helping them, whether it's by inspiration or insight, to be the best, feel the best, and live to their full potential, experience that, go on to serve others.
That is awesome. I like it.
Yeah. It sounds so cliche, but it's true.
Well, truth is truth, whether it's
Yeah,
cliched or not, but truth is
exactly.
truth. And so maybe it's called cliche because people have been repeating truth,
Yes.
and we're so used to it that it's commonplace, but truth will always be truth. One of our
Yes.
customs that we do here at Threads of Enlightenment is go back to the beginnings of our beginnings, as I call it.
Sure.
And that is the family unit location. We reside there for a short period of time, if you will. And at this place, we are going to learn a couple of things. We're going to learn about our communication skills. We're going to learn about trauma. We're going to be introduced to some form of trauma here. We're going to learn how we relate to self, our modus operandus, as they say. So what was your family unit like?
Well, it was a little atypical for those days. My mother and father were like 40 when I was born. So in the 50s, that was more unusual. So my brother and sister are a lot older than I am, 18 and 15 years respectively. And my parents were older, in really poor health from the moment I can remember, and not very happily married. It's kind of an arranged marriage, and my mom really suffered from depression. And in those days, what did they do? They just gave women Valium and, told them it was all in their head. And ultimately, because I'm going to talk about depression, I think when I was 17 or 18, she actually had shock treatments, which are not as terrifying as people think, but it's still a statement of how severe she was, what it was like for me growing up in that environment. And also in a larger generational sense, my neighborhood, many of the older, especially women in my neighborhood, I grew up in a very Orthodox Jewish neighborhood, were Holocaust survivors.
Oh, wow.
So there was a definite element of, I would say, generational depression
Uh-huh.
pain. I wouldn't say hopelessness, but there was a heaviness, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yes. Yes.
So I know that that influenced me. And as a young adult, child, adolescent, young adult, it was very, I didn't understand what was going on, what I was experiencing. And I think that was actually one of the things that it wasn't purposeful that I went into psychology, but in retrospect, it's completely understandable
Makes sense.
how it led me there to understand.
Here's this young girl that is surrounded by trauma because
Yeah.
you have the survivors of a very traumatic time in the
Oh,
history of
yeah.
mankind on this planet. And you are surrounded by them. And there is a community of them. And there is what sounds like a heaviness that
Yeah.
resides
Sadness.
amongst that group and that community. And this young girl is in the midst of all of that. How did Audrey, not the doctor yet, Audrey, manage herself in there? We know that it affects you, as you said
Yeah.
earlier. We're going to talk a little more about it. But how is she surviving? Because that is the first stage that
Yeah.
we do with ourselves.
I think I survived by actually, as with most children who grow up with either addicted parents or ill parents, became the parent at a very young age.
Hmm.
So there's a, sense of you're asking me to do something I'm not equipped to do.
Yeah,
So a lot of overwhelm. And I can look back and go, I know I tried to hide,
yeah,
very, and I was kind of an only child in a way.
yeah.
There was a lot of loneliness, I think, which I couldn't identify at the time. But definitely I remember wanting to be very small
Right.
and disappear. A lot of fear, not knowing how to relate to other kids. I was much better with adults, actually. So just a lot of confusion and wanting to hide.
Oh, it sounds as someone, and again, one of the how powerful we are as human beings, and even as young kids,
Oh,
we
yeah.
have learned, or we are good, we become really good in developing a storyline that we perceive our world through. And we
Sure.
use that perceived storyline to protect ourselves.
Uh,
Some of us hide, as you state. Some
Absolutely.
of us become like extroverts, if you will. We use different stories
Sure.
to survive amongst the darkness, if you will. Here's this young girl. She's moving through, and you said that you moved when you went to college, you picked psychology, and I can truly understand the mindset as to that decision. When you got there, and you're still Audrey at this point in time, when Audrey got there, Doc, how did she relate to the knowledge? Because the insights of psychology is going to make this young woman aware of certain things. How did your study begin to impact you as a young woman?
Well, I think it a couple of things. It helped me understand what was going on. I had the words, I had the labels, I had the perspective to understand what was going on.
Hmm.
Again, just completely transparent. As part of my internship, I went to a therapist,
Yeah,
and I have no doubt in my mind that therapy saved my life.
yeah, yeah,
Both the knowledge, the insight, the relationship.
yeah.
And I just want, this is a little off the subject, but I want to say that, one of the things I see now working with clients is that trauma doesn't have to be, 911
Hmm.
bleeding trauma.
Yeah.
Trauma can be anything.
Anything.
And as adults, sometimes we minimize the trauma we had because we're now seeing it through adult eyes where, well, maybe it wasn't so traumatic. But as a child,
Hmm.
as a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, whatever, it was traumatic, even
Yeah.
if it wasn't, I had to call the police traumatic.
Yeah, it is. Trauma is the interpretation of that young individual's
The eyes.
to that circumstances, that situation that arose, and however that interpretation was on that individual, it has laid an imprint that will guide them for the rest of their
Absolutely.
life, and they will be unpacking. They'll spend the rest of their life unpacking that trauma, and it shows
Yep.
up in many different forms and migration as it changes that we use to survive. You're in school, Doc, you're building your first member of your team, which is your coach that you're seeing, a psychologist, as they began to engage with you as a young woman now, how did you begin to manage yourself once they started uncovering things and behaviors and mindsets that you had as a young girl to protect herself?
I think, people underestimate or sometimes don't understand what therapy can be. And it's very much not just insight, it's also the relationship. And I think so for one of the first times I had explanations for
Mhm.
what I was experiencing, but I also had a sense of an adult in my life who was there for me, was maybe not technically a protector, a
Yeah.
mentor. And so it's the information, but also the relationship that saved me.
Is powerful. I love the fact that you included the relationship with that
Absolutely.
individual. And that's important because out of that relationship, you have to begin to imprint the main thread or one of the most important laws within the relationship with human being. And that is trust. If that
Yeah.
trust is not there, there is no relationships. How did that work out with you as you began to trust this individual? What was your day like there?
Well, I felt protected. All of a sudden, there wasn't this chaos in my life. I understood what was going on, what I was feeling, what was quote unquote normal. But also, I think that, you know, a, I'm not saying this is absolutely not true, but we often hear you have to love yourself first,
Hmm.
before you can love anybody else. And I don't 100% believe that.
Hmm.
I think sometimes it's by being loved first
Hmm.
and being cared for that we learn to love ourselves.
Yeah. And we'll get into that as we move forward. Here, okay, here's this girl. She's moving in. She's now in school. She graduated. The tassel is up in the air and she's tossed and she's all happy. And now she's going to be stepping in further to go and create her life, her independence, if you will. How did that begin to manifest in your life? What did it look like for this young woman upon graduation?
It was a couple of things. I think looking back, the things that started to shape my life were obviously getting my degree, yoga, which I started in the 70s before anybody knew what it was, and therapy really started to shape my life. And then just a bunch of, I don't know, cosmic things. I don't know. I lived at home. I didn't go away to college. And like I said, my parents were older, needed a lot of care.
Yeah.
Um, and I wasn't used to living with anybody. So living in a dorm with a roommate was more than I could handle. So I lived at home. And I swear, I think I would have lived at home until I was 60, except that my very first job out of college was working for the city.
Uh-huh.
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. And at that time, if you worked for the city, you had to live in the city. That
No.
was a mandate for police, firemen. So it was applied across the board. So I had to move out.
Yeah.
If I hadn't been forced to move out, and I might still be there. So that was the next thing that kind of shaped my life, was getting out on my own, that freedom, starting to get a sense of competence,
Yes.
and friendships and
Yeah.
relationships was sort of the next phase. And from there, it was just almost a series of where the wind blew me.
Yeah.
I can't say that I made decisions or was proactive. It was
Yeah.
just kind of like this great cosmic series of
Guidance, if you will.
events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here is this young woman. She begins to incorporate some of the tools. I tell people yoga is one of those tools
Yeah,
that we
definitely.
use to help with our journey because there's much meditation. Even within the yoga that you do, you have to learn how to begin to control the mind and the body. And you learn of the separation between and all of those principles that are going to begin to manifest later on in your life. Here is this individual. She has been ushered out, if you will, to her own space by the necessity of working for the city, as you stated.
Mhm.
And you started working. Now you're going to interact with others outside of your family in a more detailed and consistent pattern. How was that now beginning to manage your relationship? Because you had your stuff in college, but now you're on a professional playground, if you will.
Yeah, it was the start of really more relationships with colleagues,
Hmm.
friends, having a sense of, like I said, independence, leadership. I certainly had supervisors and close relationships and was really sort of found my community at that point. So it was a period of more safety, more stability, and immense growth, reading, spiritual. I felt like all of a sudden, I don't know if I was an old soul or what, but it was like, oh, okay, all this mysticism or metaphysical, we used to call it, was a fit for me. It was like, oh, okay, I've always known this.
Yeah,
I've always known that we create our own reality. And here was you know, a, a foundation for that. Other people think this too. I'm not crazy.
that is awesome. And finding that, Doc, how did you begin to create your own reality with that knowledge, as you stated? Because it takes us time. We don't usually, even though knowledge is there,
Oh, yeah, knowledge
we're
is
all
never
over the
enough.
world.
Yeah,
What was that
yeah.
like?
It was yeah, I don't think anybody's really smart until they're 50. I
Yeah.
look back and it's like, yeah, those were really dumb decisions. So, yeah, it was just little by little, the experience, combined with the knowledge, because knowledge is never enough. And if
Yeah.
knowledge were enough, nobody would smoke.
Yeah.
But, learning, reading, was almost like a coming home. Mhm.
Yeah.
And finding people who thought the way I did,
The
so it
same.
didn't
Yeah.
feel so strange. I
Yeah.
was a vegetarian. Almost nobody was a vegetarian in those days. So finding that community was like finding a family.
Yeah. So you found your team, your tribe. And it's important
Mhm.
when one goes on the journey to find your tribe, man, because
Oh, yeah.
sometimes you are getting such insights that you think you're alone and you're the only one and all of these different things. And when you have time to meet, and usually the divine designers will bring these people in line with you so that you could see that you're not nuts, as they say. When did you begin to really have the encounter with depression in your life? Because we know you're going through life and you're having the therapy, and I'm sure it is being discussed, but when did it begin to manifest in your life, Doc, and to the point
When
where you're like, wait, I need
I
some help?
yeah, when I look back, I really think it started with adolescence.
Hmm.
So for me, looking back, I want to say the first time I remember being seriously, depressed was around, I want to say the age of 10 or 11. And at
Oh,
that time, puberty hit, hormones hit. And I think that was actually the start of it. And, struggling with it through adolescence, through
hmm,
young adulthood, then it's starting to wane as I got older and had relationships and had support. And then, or not oddly enough, I think kicking back in again as, in my 50s when menopause started to hit and hormones started to change again. And, you're not young anymore, and
yeah.
you're losing relationships, people are going, parents are dying, friends are getting sick. So I think it kicked back in, and I really, at some point, and I think I mentioned to you, I did a speaker series on this. Depression is like having chronic pain. It's almost for me, I see it as, no different from somebody who's struggled with arthritis
Yeah.
or, back pain their whole life. It can be chronic. It affects how we think. Depression changes our brain. Our brain
It
causes
programs us.
depression.
It's one of
And
the programmers.
and so, it really affects how you think. And that's really the scary part is for me and what I watch in others is when we need people the most, when we're at our lowest,
Hmm.
is when we're least likely to reach out. We think we're always going to feel this way. Nothing's going to help. No one cares. And so we just go down that hole even more.
Talk to us about that space right there, because there are a lot of people that are there, Doc. There are a lot of people that are battling depression. You and I know the data as to how prevalent it is in society. You were there. What tools did you bring into your life to assist you to walk through that? We know that there are medication, we know that those type tools,
Mhm.
but what other tools did you bring into your life to help you to manage that? Because after that, I want to go into you be becoming a proactive individual in interviewing so many to get to the baseline of that. Talk to us as to what tools did you bring into your life to help you out first?
I think other people,
Hmm.
like I said, therapists, but also friends, significant others, and knowledge. Oddly enough, I think that at some point that seed, got planted to have hope, to have faith, that hopelessness was the lowest vibration. And even understanding my own thought process, when I
Yeah,
went there, that this isn't good.
yeah, yeah,
This, panic attack at 2 in the morning and sense of hopelessness or fear it is not, I don't want to say not normal, but I had at least some perspective that this, something's wrong.
yeah.
Something's wrong. I need to get help.
And as you began to get help and become stronger, if you will, in learning how your triggers are and what to do when your triggers are arriving and so forth, and you're now becoming an advocate, how did that process took place? That you were one that is a sufferer, and then you became this strong advocate whereby you began to investigate it, bring people together so that they can, with the knowledge and the information, be able to affect others on the outside.
Yeah, to have the tools. And what I tell people all the time, my clients, anybody who's listening, is that we don't wait until we're having a heart attack to learn CPR.
Yeah,
We need to practice these tools, breathing, meditation, calling other people, getting support when we're feeling good,
yeah.
so that the behaviors become more natural, more automatic, so we know what to do, so we can see some of the early warning signs and reach out. Because like I said, it's a cruel irony that when we need others the most
Hmm.
is when we're least likely to reach out.
And when you were there, Doc, and you had this group of people and you were questioning and interviewing and stuff like that, what did you discover?
Boy, where to start? To really, we need others to support us,
Hmm.
to help us see our own worth when we can't quite see it yet,
Hmm.
to build a foundation. I often will have my clients build an evidence list
Hmm.
so that when they are at their lowest and they post it everywhere, they can go back and see, okay, these are the facts. I've accomplished this. I've accomplished that. I've done this. I've done that. And to have the tools at hand that help support them. And one of my favorite sayings is feelings aren't facts.
Yeah,
And recognize that this is a feeling, not a fact. Is this 100% true? Are you absolutely positively 100% convinced or know that you're a failure? And
yeah.
of course, no, I don't know, but it's a feeling. It's not,
Yeah, I tell people I remember the first time I mentioned that, I said, the world, most of us are governed by our feelings. And feelings and emotions are important.
oh yeah,
But when you come, our feelings is not a fact in this
right.
sense, because I can play a song and change your feeling just like that. But facts are there. But then I said there's a superior one to facts, and that is the truth. The
Yeah.
truth, once you locate it in your process of your journey, and that truth about your trauma, that truth has the ability to set you free. The principle, and you shall know the truth, meaning that you shall have knowledge of the incident that took place back then. And once you unpack all of that and you begin to
Mhm.
change your perspective and you see that truth, there's a degree of freedom there that arrive once that you go, oh wow, that's not, as you say, that's just not truth about me. That's just how I feel, but that's not it. So once you recognize, oh, that's not it, it changed your life and you begin to move forward.
Yeah, that pulls us out of that. One of the things that happens with depression is our perspective, our view really narrows. All we see is what's negative. All we see is a tiny fraction of our life, of the world, of reality. And so we need tools, we need people to help us go, okay, this is not all there is. It's not hopeless. You're not a failure. Your life isn't over. And we're very much, if it's hard to separate ourselves from our feelings. And, a really common kind of, in the coaching world, in the
Yeah.
psychological world, is to talk about limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And I actually don't think we have limiting beliefs. I think we have limiting feelings because when you ask somebody, well, I have this limiting belief that I'm not capable of earning more than $100,000. I don't believe that. Well, do you really 100% believe that? Well, no, I don't 100% believe it, but it feels true. It's our feelings that can take over. And so we have to manage our feelings, allow ourselves to feel the full range of emotion, be able to
Mhm.
label them. I do believe that what we can name, we can tame. And part of our growth as an adult, as a human being, is language,
Yeah.
the ability to get perspective, get mastery, get control over our feelings by understanding them, labeling them, and that just triggers our higher brain, our higher functioning, that helps us get out of despair.
Guys, you've been listening to us, and we have an expert, if you will, in the field of psychology and so forth, and the knowledge that is deposited in her. We're going to make sure that you have access to her, and we'll provide all of her links and so forth so that
Oh,
you can
thank
get
you.
there and become free, so that you can identify some of those limiting emotions, as she stated, that she believed that that's what's holding you and I back. And
Mm-hmm.
once we've learned to name them, identify them, and you shall know them. And once you
Mm-hmm.
know them, you are able to get your freedom from them. And so here,
Oh,
Doc,
absolutely.
go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say absolutely. It's in our collective unconscious, in our myths, in our stories. I love to talk about Rumpelstiltskin, the fairy tale. As
Yeah.
soon as the uh, captured maiden learns his name, she's set free.
Yeah. And that knowledge, that's what I tell people, and have discussion about that knowledge is gives you freedom. As you said, one of the things that a seeker begins to acquire as they're moving through their pain is knowledge from studying and going after data, if you will. Become a seeker wherever you are and whatever situation you're going through. Get data. How can you do that? You can study, you can listen to podcasts, you can do reading and all this stuff, but you still need a team. You
Oh, yeah.
need someone
Relationships
like
heal.
Doc.
Yeah.
And again, get your team together. Have someone who has gone through those that have gone through depression. I have an individual that is familiar with it. And if you heard her story, her genesis, if you will, she was surrounded by a community of those that were traumatized, and that heaviness that walked with them from one of the most traumatic period in the history of mankind that we know on this planet. And yet she has been able to navigate herself to come out on the other side, to learn some things so that she can turn back to you and make you aware that take a look at your emotion. It's not all about your belief. It's your emotion that guides you. And there's ways she can make you aware of it by introducing you to certain tools as well to move you through. Doc, here you are. You have been on this path, on this scene, and helping others for a long time. As
Yep.
I was studying all of your information and listening to you from different sources. I want you to introduce the listener, if you will, to the process of how you handle someone, because the questions I tell people is where a skilled coach will be able to locate you where you're at and then be able to escort you. Walk us through one of your encounters, if you will, when you had that client, that individual that was before you, and you were able, Doc, from your conversation and working with them, able to help them to create this new perspective that showed them who they truly are and how they gain their victory once they identify, as you state, their emotional storytelling about themselves.
Sure. And I just want to be clear that, coaching is very different than therapy. And so my coaching works with people who are not experiencing severe pathology or need, medication. Well, this is separate from that. So these are people who are overall functioning well, but not to their full potential. Maybe there is some depression or some holding back. And so and this takes time,
Yeah.
because you have to build trust first. if you're on a path and you don't see the train coming, and I do, and I'm like, there's a train coming and it's going to hit you, and you don't trust me and you don't see it, you're not going to believe me. So it's really about building trust and intimacy. Then, for example, I have a client who, after almost a year working together, and she made an enormous amount of progress, developed new relationships, started experiencing life again after, taking care of a spouse who passed away and kids who passed away, started to tell me, started to remember the trauma of her childhood and her abusive siblings that
Mm-hmm.
she had completely, if not repressed, not acknowledged, and not connected to how she was seeing the world now, which was much how she had related to the sibling growing up, being scared, being on pins and needles, being afraid, not speaking up. And as we started to connect the dots and that veil lifts, and again, it's not just knowledge. It goes so much deeper than that. It's connections. It's awareness coming to the surface of this is how I've seen the world. This is how I've operated. This is what I've experienced. That shift, that aha comes, and it just changes everything. Now,
Mm-hmm.
instead of procrastination, instead of hiding, instead of not sticking up for herself, all of a sudden there are these steps towards mastery and empowerment, and thinking about, what do I do want? Even from, do I want to take some dance classes, to, do I want a new career? How do I want to live my life? There's a sense of energy, empowerment that comes when we can connect the dots
Yeah.
of, and like I said, it can be small trauma, it can be big trauma, but when we can step back with some objectivity, and suddenly, the veil lifts, the curtain
Mm-hmm.
comes way, and we see the world, we understand that, I have more power
Yeah.
than I thought I did. What I thought was true, that the world is a scary, dangerous place, is not necessarily true, and not always true. I can live differently. I can see things differently. I swear, one of the things that I routinely hear my clients say to me is, I never thought of it like that. I never
Yeah.
saw it like that.
Yeah. That's the
And
new
that's the
well.
language of transformation.
Yeah, that is it's right there. That is the language, because and through the questions and the engaging of your energy, as you state, in that energy, the engagement creates a space where there's safety, secureness there, and we express that as trust. And
Oh,
once
yeah.
they have achieved that, then they're able to rest and begin to truly investigate what is residing amongst them in their dark spaces. And when you know the truth, as I've been saying, the truth, there's a degree of freedom there.
Yeah.
Talk to us as to how did she express her freedom? Because a lot of people, we get so bogged down in life, and the programs that they tell us we ought to behave, doctor. Once we see ourselves as this individual and this newness, we do some of the most marvelous things that
Yeah.
we
We come out of
stress
our
to do.
shell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a client yesterday, when I was saying, how we fight for our limitations. How are you holding yourselves back? And she said, I've really been selling myself short. I am capable of so much more.
Uh-huh.
And, one of my, we'd call a rule, mantra, come from my playbook,
Uh-huh.
as when I worked with adolescents, I always said the theme is when to support, when to confront, and when to threaten to maim.
Yeah.
So sometimes we need, yeah, you did the best you could, and that's okay.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes it's, did you really do the best you could? I'm not falling for this bullshit anymore. You can do better than this.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really, okay, I've got to call bullshit here.
Yeah.
So it just, and do I get it right all the time? No,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but I can usually recover from getting it wrong. It's the truth with ourselves,
Mhm.
about our power, about what we've seen as a limitation. All transformation, all growth starts with the truth, with honesty,
Yeah, absolutely.
with
You have a mic.
ourselves.
You have a mic, Doc. This mic is connected to all, I think, 3 billion plus of us here on this planet. What would you say?
Oh, there's so much. Okay. So first, believe in miracles. Miracles happen.
Yeah.
And miracles are often really how we see things differently. When we can change our perspective, that's a miracle, seeing things differently. There's a line from the Bhagavad Gita that says, what's like poison in the beginning, but nectar at the end. Sometimes
Yeah.
things can seem so negative. People hate the word discipline, but discipline will set you free.
Mm-hmm.
What seems negative is positive. Don't give up hope. Don't lose faith. Again, this is one cliche I really believe, which is believe in yourself, believe in miracles, reach out. We need to take care of each other. We've come so far technologically in the last 200 years, but we're no better at taking care of each other.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to leave it at that because there's nothing else to say. Doc, I want to thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. This has been really, really good. I enjoyed
Oh,
this.
thank you.
And I like some things you've made me aware of that I'm going to investigate as well. And I love that you say you alerted me to pay more attention to my emotions and the limitation that resides there, and
Yeah.
not so much as to my belief, but my emotions. And I need to take a deeper dive into that. And those of you that are listening to us, I'm going to provide you all of Doc's link so you get all of her things, everything she gets. You need to be there. You need to learn from her.
No,
Depression
please.
is, again, the data on depression is amazing. It
It's
touches
terrifying.
everyone walks through that space of depression at some point in time in their life. So I know that for a fact. So
Yeah.
now, how can you navigate that? Here is someone that has known how to, and she has provided tools, and we're going to make sure you have access to her. Doc, thank you so much for coming to
Thank
Threads of
you.
Enlightenment. You are so welcome. Like I said, you have sparked something in me personally, and
Oh,
I am going to investigate, and I'm going to pick up your books as well because I know you have that information there, and to do some more studying with you so that I can learn about my emotions and the limitation that resides there. And thank you so much for making me aware of that.
thank you.
You're welcome. You have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.